Okay, it is 3 o'clock. We will call the May 1st, 2023 study session to order. And it looks like today we're going to talk about downtown parking lots. And that was the SDI girls, in case you guys want to know what that noise in the background was. So, okay, I'll look at...
Yeah, so this was a discussion, we briefly had a discussion in our strategic planning session a couple weeks about some projects in the downtown that we're looking at, and we have some remaining funds from the STAR bond that are really intended to be used for parking lots. And so staff worked to develop a couple of ideas and options, and so we're going to just present that to you today. And Jim Teutsch is going to do the heavy lifting on this. So take it away, Jim.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Jim Teutsch, Director of Public Works. So as Jacob mentioned, that for several months we've been talking about these remaining STAR bond funds and how they might be best put to use. And there are a number of various projects in the downtown that we're bringing to you for your consideration today. So with that, if you would go to the next slide, please, Scott. So the first one is the Temple parking lot. Probably the biggest reason that this comes to light is this is at the southern end of our downtown project. It is something that is seen as you first come into the downtown. It's sort of a headway or a pretty key prominent location for the downtown, and this parking lot is not in very good shape. I included a few pictures that it might be a little difficult to see, but the concrete approaches are in extremely bad shape. The parking lot, the asphalt is rutted, it holds water, and it is just a large slab of asphalt. There is no landscaping or anything like that. So we thought that this would be one of the projects that we should be bringing to you. The next one is the City Lights stage. Now that we've had a year of events that have taken place there, many of you, I'm sure, had attended one of those events, and you know that it gets extraordinarily hot. And we thought that it would be a good idea to offer some shade options for that parking lot and stage area. And then lastly, you know, the long-going issue of the difficulty in staff being able to manipulate the light colors. We have a lot of recognition weeks and months, and a lot of organizations that would like to be able to take advantage of the technology in those lighting systems, and we don't really have the technology in place to accommodate those requests. So we wanted to see if we could provide a solution to help with that problem as well. Next slide, please. So as Jacob said, I wanted to first show you the funding for the parking lot, the Fieldhouse parking lot STAR bond fund balance. And you can see that we've expended on two different projects, what I call Fifth Street Parking North, or the Bank America section of that parking lot, and then Fifth Street Parking South, which was the last project that we had just recently completed within this past year. That leaves us a balance of about $417,000. So everything that we are looking at and what we will present to you is trying to keep that number in mind as we go forward. Slide, please. So, speaking of the Temple parking lot, I asked one of our civil engineers, who we refer to as a traffic engineer. He's certainly the guy I go to for traffic engineering issues, Mr. Johnson, to provide an engineer's estimate for the cost of this. Kent is the one who does the major projects for the city of Salina, so I feel comfortable with this. And it does a number of things. One, reflects the functionality of our other parking lots as well as the aesthetics of the other projects in the downtown area. As just mentioned, the Fifth Street parking is a good example from what it was to what it is now. It would include new concrete entrances. We would repair broken sidewalk as needed. It does provide for landscaping, and then obviously we would do a 2-inch mill and inlay and then mark that parking lot accordingly. And I already mentioned at the south end of the downtown project that this doesn't reflect the quality and the approved aesthetics as the rest of the downtown. So we felt like this was a good project to bring to you. We have met with Salina 2020, the master developers, so they're aware of all of these projects. I thought that's probably important to mention to you. Slide, please. So this is what we see as what the project would look like. It includes a 2-inch mill and inlay, as I mentioned. Currently, there are 106 stalls in that parking lot, but many of those stalls are not compliant. So if we were to design the parking lot, we would need to make them all compliant. And so at the end of this project, there would be 100 compliant stalls. So it would meet all code requirements. It does provide for ADA stalls, as you can see. And there would be 12 landscaping beds in this with a tree and 2 bushes in each of those beds. And then the intent, as mentioned, we would replace the concrete entrances in their entirety to include that sidewalk section in the middle. And we would also then pave and mark the parking lot. Next slide, please. So the next project that we were asked to look at, this started quite a long time ago. We had some early meetings. We met with SDI and some others, other city staff, and from those discussions, we said we need to try to find a cost-effective, obviously we're operating within a budget, a multi-purpose shaded spectator area, and provide covered parking to be used for events, but still allow the entire parking lot to remain open for normal parking. I did want to include the expenses that we've put in that parking lot so far. You can see, if you think back, this started with the Ad Astra Parklet, where we added some features that was previously just a small muddy lot. And it has tables and a chessboard and some other amenities for the public. We moved the stage, we built the stage where it sits today, and then we paved the parking lot. And all of those projects, we also had, obviously, we had city labor from Public Works and Parks and others. So we've probably have about $250,000 in that parking lot as it stands today. If you look to the far right, after those, or prior to those meetings, I developed a bunch of just when it was first brought to me that we should consider fabric sales, I didn't know anything about them, and but I tried to do as much research as I possibly could, and from that I developed, I don't know, 12 to 20 slides maybe that kind of represent what you see on the far right. And then I started reaching out to companies. So we use these as, hey, I'm not a designer, I just want you to kind of get a feel for what we're trying to do. And so we provided the description to them that we have spectators, that we want to be able to provide places that they can get out of the sun and enjoy programming. Typically, this programming occurs in the late afternoon, so we have a western sun that we're dealing with. And then would you please design your idea of what a shaded facilities would look like in that parking lot. So we didn't influence what they designed. This is what the companies prepared in response to that request. Now, we've had numerous conversations with them as this project develops, because they would ask something and then we would have to respond, and then anyone that was helping us to look at these designs, then we would share that information with the other vendors to try to provide some consistency in the overall design pictures. So we worked with a number of vendors, 4 in particular, about this shade structure. We did review the products that they have, the warranties that they provide, and we asked them to give us cost estimates based on the designs that they provided to us. I will say that we also asked that they make this modular pricing, so that way, if you decide that you want a particular feature, but you do not want the entire package, then each of these can be priced in a way that would allow us to make that sort of like menu selection of these various shade structures. We wanted to give you a general sense of the cost and the scale, and show you a couple of design ideas that the vendors had. Obviously, if this were to go forward, we would formalize this process, take it out to bid, and ask them to reply once more with their results. The good thing about this, by reaching out to the 4 vendors and doing this, it enabled us to know what is it that we need to specify when we do the specifications for a request for proposals, because that changed pretty significantly as this project proceeded. Next slide, please. So there is a number of different sail designs. These are fairly common around the United States. They're used in public parks, along boardwalks, along beaches, in urban areas, as well as parks and playgrounds. In just about, I think every state probably has representations like these. The neat thing is that they are very customizable, as you can see, and you can do quite a bit with this fabric, and we'll talk a little bit more about that coming up. So the next part of this was less about the shade sail and more about the covered parking. We have to be able to, if we were to do something like this, we would need to provide the ability for people to still access that parking lot. So here you're looking at what's called a hip roof. You can see the design of the hip roof, very much like the hip roof on a house. It's a cantilever structure, so there is a single arm that reaches out and holds that shade in place. Typically, and as pictured here, that's a 9-foot eave. And we would specify, this is one of the things that came out in our discussions, that we would need at least a 14-foot eave for any shade structure that we put in that parking, because of the size of the vehicles that we had, the multi-purpose use of that parking lot. We didn't want to limit the ability for trucks or other vehicles to be able to park in the parking lot and yet still provide shade. So we talked to each of the vendors. They did say that they can do 14-foot eaves, or at basically the base of the hip roof, and that would not be a problem. It changes the steel. The steel has to be a little bit stronger and stouter, and the footers are a little bit deeper and wider, but it certainly can be done. And it is part of their standard drawings that they go from 9 to 14 feet anyway, so it would not be a problem. I'm not sure what this facility is, but you see a lot of single cantilevers along the backs of parking lots, especially for like apartment complexes. This is a fairly common use for this kind of structure. Slide, please. And then the next one is, if you wanted to do something in the center of the parking lot, we would recommend, and the designers for these companies recommend, a double cantilever. So this is, instead of 19 feet long, it's 39 to 40 feet long, and or wide, I should say, and as long as it needs to be. These are modular, so you can continue to add cantilevers. So you could cover the entire center section of the parking lot if you so chose to do that. Everything still applies. We would still use hip roof. We would still use the cantilever style structure. And obviously you can see the benefit of having fewer poles, less likely to come in contact with less likely for vehicles to come in contact with the structure. There was some talk about whether or not we pull the footers out of the ground to provide additional protection. This is something that Troy Reinert, who is part of the team, our building superintendent, I don't want to mispronounce his title, facility superintendent, but he looked at that and recommended and asked the vendors, could they do that? And one of them even provided a schematic of what that would look like. So we can do raised concrete footers rather than sinking them in the ground, just to add a little bit extra protection to that structure itself. Slide, please. So one of the companies, we talked to a number of companies. One of the companies is called Shade Systems. And again, we told them that we wanted some kind of sail or some kind of shade structure at the front of the stage. And this was Shade Systems' idea. Now, this is where, this is a good example of why it was necessary for us to do this level of a deep dive into this, and then before we bring it to you, so that if we get guidance from you today, then we can write the specifications accordingly. One of the things that we learned and passed on to all the vendors in this process, for example, was the 14-foot eaves. And this is the original diagram, so that you see that as this sail slopes down, it's less than 14, so we would want them to correct that so that the lowest point of any of these would be at least 14 feet high. One of the things that, I mean, it's a very nice design. It was the first one that we received. I was kind of excited about it when I first saw it, but as we looked at it more, especially Mr. Reinert and I, we began thinking, having 5 poles just leads to that much more likelihood that it's going to get hit by a car and then damaged or something like that. So we would probably, based on your direction, recommend that we would go with a single sail with only 3 poles, just to help eliminate the risk of damage to the sail, if that, again, is something that you're interested in doing. Slide, please. So if you see the kind of shaded out portion of the single cantilever at the bottom of the slide, that was where, when we got the first drawing back from the Shade Systems designers, that's where they had put it. So the first thing I sent back to them is, can we pick this up and move it to the other side of the parking lot? Again, most of the events are occurring in the early evening, western sun. It would make sense to cast that shade shadow, the shadow across the parking lot, rather than sending it out into the street. So they said yes, it wouldn't be a problem, and they moved it into the position that you see in this picture. Here's another one where we would say there's probably some things that we would want to change in the specifications, because they built their cantilever 90 feet long. We probably, if we're going to do this, we probably ought to make it the full, I think it's 122 feet for the full length, to cover all those parking lots on the western edge of that parking lot. But that's just another example. We could easily specify that to the vendors if we do an RFP for this project. Any questions so far about what we've looked at? Okay. So this is another company. The name of the company and the designer is All Inclusive Rec, but they use USA Shade products, and there's actually any number of vendors that use, to a great degree, shade systems or USA Shade. This is one that happens to use USA Shade, and there's another one who responded who also uses USA Shade we'll talk about in a little bit. So clearly you see the columns are a little bit more safe in their placement, and there's fewer of them, and the heights are sufficient. In fact, I left all these unaltered. This particular drawing it's a little too high, so we would actually specify that they lower those two columns against the stage down about 2 feet so that it lines up with the top of the gutter line on the front of the stage. Again, they said no problem. They can adjust the height to whatever we need, so they were certainly willing to do that. It is high enough because one of the things the designer said, because I asked them, why, and it wasn't just these guys, it was all of the designers, and they all came back with the same point. It's something in architecture where they want to tie in the top of the stage to the roof line of the cantilevers. They said when you don't notice it, it's sort of subconscious to most people, but when you look at it, it would look extremely out of place if those two things don't somehow come together to form like a cohesive package. So that's why you see 2 columns at stage height, 1 column at cantilever height, just to bring your eye down so it naturally looks more appropriate for the design. Slide, please. I have to say, I am not a designer, so this is simply a PowerPoint slide. Sails don't actually look like this when you put them up. They, if you ever noticed a slide, they're not triangular. They sort of bow in the middle on each side, and that's they are designed that way. But I've used PowerPoint a lot, but I don't know how to make that shape work for this picture. And I wanted to give you an example of what it might look like. What I like about this design is that it would allow vehicles to pass underneath the shade when it's acting as a parking lot, still providing shade, but also allowing traffic to pass underneath it, where that traffic passes when you do the circle in the parking lot in front of the stage. So this is a rather poor rendering, but I think it gives you a little bit of the idea. I guess one thing to note, this is again just a design thing that we learned, that the attachment points for the sail are going to be 1 foot lower than the top of the post. So it was deliberate that those poles are higher than the stage, and that is so that we can align the sail with the stage versus trying to align the poles with the stage. And we also think that would affect the wind's effect on this sail, because it has the protection of the stage in front of it when you set it at this height. So that's why those posts look the way they do. Slide, please. So this is just to say that you look at it on paper and they each had it. One had it at 20 feet even, and it's not quite 20 feet because grade is different by 4 inches from one side to the other. So the pole heights, the attachment points are slightly different. The next thing is, we would have to take this to the design review board. If you tell me, yes, let's go forward and we kind of like this idea, then we would take that to the design review board and they would look at the colors. One vendor did provide the colors to me, so I'll share that with the design review board. And it's interesting and it's important to note that this is not waterproof. This is made of HDPE, high density polyethylene, and it is like a mesh. So, and I can show you that so you can feel it, but it would allow water to pass through it. Some of it will bead off, like for example on the sail, simply because we're changing elevations of how the pitch of the sail is, but it's intended to be shade. One of the things that we looked at very carefully was what is the shade factor? And different colors have different factors. So I asked the designers, well, what colors have the highest shade values that are resistant to fading? So that is why that top line is sort of got a box around it, and I would pass that on to the design review board as well. They would recommend that while all of this material has a life expectancy of about 10 years, you will have less fading and probably better fabric performance if you choose one of these shades that are in that box. So it's not just about aesthetics, it's also about the longevity of the product and how you use it. So I guess I wanted to just point that out a little bit. Slide, please.
A couple of questions, Jim.
Yes.
You go back one. What's the distance from the stage to that center pole? I saw numbers on here, and I haven't done the trigonometry.
I want to say, I'm going to guess, I believe it's probably going to be, with a single sail, it's probably going to be between 50 and 55 feet, I think, from the stage to the point of the sail. Is that what you ask?
Yeah, from the stage to that far.
With a single sail, I think it's somewhere around 50-plus feet.
Okay. And you said that the mesh, the water goes through it. Does the wind go? Is it designed so the wind goes through it too?
That's why they use a mesh product rather than a solid. This would, unless you built ridiculously large footers, it would act as a sail if you made it out of a solid piece. So you would be working against the design if you made it solid. So the poles are rated to 150 miles an hour. The sails and the cantilever fabric is rated to 90 miles an hour. And depending on which product of fabric you use would depend on whether or not it can withstand snow load or something like that. And we'll talk about that on another vendor's recommendation. Is that it? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so getting back to this company, this is All-Inclusive Rec. These were by far the easiest to work with. They were very patient with me and allowed me to make a lot of changes, and I had a lot of discussions with them. So I appreciate they provided a sort of a 3D rendering. If you were to do all three, this is what they would recommend that the parking lot look like. We would probably, Public Works and Park staff would work together to, if we, for example, were to buy this product as they presented it, we would have to take down the fabric every winter. Now, there's a way that can be avoided that we'll talk about on another slide, but in this example, that fabric is not meant to stay up in the winter. They said that if you take the time to take the fabric down in the winter, the product will last much longer. There's a way that you can simply upgrade the fabric so that you do not have to take it down. In all instances, the sail will have to come down in the wintertime. There's no avoiding that. Just the geometry and the forces, if snow load were placed on it, sails are not designed for winter months. So depending on what we select then would determine whether or not this product could stay down. You could make it so that the cantilevers stay up year-round, I guess is the point. Slide, please. So I wanted to just give you an example, and basically what I'm saying here is, just looking at these two vendors, basically you could choose a product that's under $70,000 that is completely installed by the vendor's installation crew for about $68,000, and you could do all of the parking lot like shown in that last slide for around $300,000. In this case, it's $282,000. I would suggest it might be worth upgrading the fabric to not have to take the cantilevers down, and we'll talk about that in a minute. There was another company I reached out to called Willie Goat. They are a funny name, but it's a very large company. They make a lot of really good products. But I think just because we were asking so many questions and wanting it designed specifically to this parking lot, that Willie Goat said, we're not really going to provide you any more offerings. So we didn't think that that was worth sharing. Slide, please. So in the end, what does that mean? So assuming that you wanted to do the Temple project, and we started with $417, almost $418,000 balance from the Star Bond funds, then we would be left with about $240,000. And then each of these columns are the options that you could select. You could select sale only, sale plus single, sale plus double, or all of the above. You could choose the entire parking lot as it's shown. So you can see I did recommend a 15% contingency. That is talking with all the vendors. There are undoubtedly things that they uncover through experience. One is when they dig these footers, because these footers are, probably 112 inches in the ground. They are 3 or 4 feet round. They're big footers to hold these poles. These are 10 to 12 inch thick poles. They're not small by any means, and so you have to have a strong footer to support them. Well, inevitably, these companies have found that when you're digging into public space, you're going to run into something, and there's going to be a problem. So that's why we're recommending a 15% contingency. But then you see the balance across the bottom. And the last one shows a negative, and it has an asterisk, but there are a couple of things. The master developers, one, said that there may be funds available to help offset the cost of the Temple, the parking lot. I don't think they know that for sure. I know I don't know that yet, but there's a possibility there. And this is part of pavement management. It is part of the downtown, so you could easily say, Jim, we can cover this with pavement management money, and we would, say, okay, and we could do it that way. So in the end, what I would say is the cost is such that we could do any one of the options if you wanted to do that and be able to afford it. Slide, please. And then Commissioner Longbine did ask about solar. This was a tough one. I found a company called VPS out of Texas. They're headquartered at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, and they specialize in parking structures, parking lots, and just large facility hail protection and shade. So this is where I said, this is the company that introduced me to a product called Extreme 32. And this is a USA Shade product, but we could make it an equivalent in the specifications so that we asked any company that wanted to bid on this that they provide Extreme 32 or equivalent fabric so that it matches the ability to handle snow loads and to be able to stay up throughout winter months for the cantilevers, if you chose to do that. VPS said we can do it with solar or we can do it without solar. In the top picture, you see a parking garage, a 3-level parking garage. I think this one is in Texas, but it has USA Shade product, so the exact same picture that you saw before, except they mount crossbars on the framing of the cantilever, and it allows for the placement of solar panels. So in answer to the first part of your question, yes, it can be done. The second part of your question, I apologize, I couldn't get it into the slide packet. They were working frantically and over the weekend, and we did get the answer. So Extreme 32 on all fabric, so that is one difference in them compared to the others. Canopies only, no solar, $309,915, so roughly $310,000. So a little bit more expensive than the last one that I showed you, but again, this is a product that you can leave up through winter months. It's a stronger product. It's probably a better product. VPS rates it at 2-inch hail, so it can withstand pretty good forces against it. It still maintains the 150/90 ratings for wind speed. Solar, he said, his design engineers, there's a lot more that goes into this, so he gave me a range. He said it's going to be somewhere, for the number of stalls that we would do, it's going to be somewhere between 43.2 kilowatts and 62.6 kilowatts. And what that means is, if you think about across the top of the structures, that is either a single row of solar panels or a double row of solar panels. So I'll give you those two figures, but think in terms of 1 row or 2 rows per structure. A single row would be about $680,000, and a double row would be $731,000. So you're probably going to spend somewhere around $7 to $7.25 for the canopy with solar. In all this, I did come across kind of a neat little thing I thought I would share by Willie Goat, the company that didn't bid on the parking lot or didn't choose to provide information on the parking lot. Just another way to think about solar. You could put it in parks. You could make, these are picnic tables. There's 4 seats around them. They have solar power. It comes down to plugs so that you can plug in a computer and work in the park while your children are playing in the park. You could charge your phone or whatever you want. So there are options. That table with the solar option, that solar sail, is about almost $32,000. Staff talked a lot about this. We certainly think that there are probably, there's very likely better locations to use solar. This is probably not the best application, and the primary reason being because there's not direct use for the product. Even if, VPS said it's not uncommon for them to add electric car chargers to these, but while that's a feature, that is not going to capture all of the energy that the solar panels provide. So it can be done, and it is done in the United States, and that's sort of the cost for doing something like this. We do think there's opportunities to at least think about solar, though, and I named a few of them. The recycling center, I think Kenwood Cove is an excellent idea. I think the fuel site could be one. The recycling center. There's a number of where you have a direct facility that you could provide that power to is probably the best application for the use of solar. Next slide, please. So we talked about the fabric, Extreme 32 fabric. The cantilevers stay up year-round. It is a hip roof design. It looks exactly the same as the other USA Shade because VPS is a sister company of USA Shade. So that's why it looks identical to it. It's not coincidence. It's because this just happens to be a company that also owned by a company that also owns USA Shade. And then we talked about the hail protection, the ability for car charging stations. They did say that there has to be a lot of work behind the scenes with the energy company, and then that they can do it with or without solar options. They did say that a project like this, and most solar projects do qualify for about a 30% rebate from the federal government. It's grants that you have to apply for, but there are programs that you can recoup about 30% of the total cost of solar. I guess it's worth pointing out that those costs did not include the car chargers. It did not include a lot of the engineering that would be necessary. That is just cost of materials for the solar. Slide, please. Now, when we started this, I told you, I think it was like 6 months ago when we first got together. It's been quite a while. My brain, when I was given this assignment, my brain was thinking hard structure. It did not take me long and much research to realize that that is an extraordinarily expensive option. It's probably not something we can afford. I wanted to share it with you nonetheless. I thought that if we were to do something like this, we'd have to use the western part of the parking lot to sort of make it fit. That's what those dotted lines are supposed to represent. And then picks 1 and 2 at the top, and then 5 and 6 at the bottom. Those are picks from a part of the downtown streetscape project from HDR called the Pavilion. So these were examples that they provided. I think on the beginning slide, I mentioned that it was like $600,000 to $1.1 million in 2017 dollars. And we all know that construction costs and things have went up since then. So I don't know what number you want to use as a multiplier, but it would not surprise me if you could add 30% to that or something like that, or more, to get accurate pricing for one of these. The one just up from the bottom with the food truck in it, that was from Oshner, Hare & Hare from the Renaissance plan when we first started the downtown. And then early on, that next one was just my attempt at trying to look at another structure. I looked at Overland Parks and thought that maybe, something like that, either metal or wood, but they can be built. We could probably figure out a way to fit it in the parking lot, but I think, and I don't know because I don't have quotes for that, but I would think that that's about $1 million proposition, I would guess. Next slide. The last thing that we were asked to look at is the overhead structures. Currently, there are 8 presets at the base of each of our structures in a lockbox. You see the buttons up there. That's what it looks like. So we have 8 presets on each overhead structure. The overhead structures do not communicate with one another, so we have to program each one of those. If we don't use a preset, we have to program them from an aerial truck with the city engineer and the traffic control foreman or one of his technicians, and it takes about 30 minutes per structure to do that. So you're looking at, it generally takes about 2.5 to 3 hours to program the downtown lights. That is why we have been very hesitant to entertain ideas about changing colors for different events. And I think we would all like to see that if there's a solution to that. So we reached out. This has actually been going on for a couple of years, trying to figure out a solution. And speaking to Pharos, the company the system that we have in place in our downtown overhead structures, you're speaking to electrical engineers who I think they talk another language that I'm not sure what it is, but it's very hard to communicate. So we asked Jabbit, a local computer company, would you please talk to Pharos? So we made that connection. And by that connection with Jabbit speaking to Pharos, they came up basically with 2 options. One, you either put mini PCs, so a little computer about that big, inside the box, and you put a router in each one of those boxes, and you can communicate with the structures one at a time. Or you find a cloud-based software program. Well, we learned it just so happens that Pharos has something called Pharos Cloud. And Pharos Cloud will allow these to talk to each other in combination with the routers. So you still have to put the routers in each of the boxes, and then you pay for a subscription for a cloud-based service, and you can have unlimited light changing, and you're changing all 5 at once, and our technicians can do it from the comfort of his pickup truck and just make the changes on a computer, and then all 5 of the lights would change. So depending on how long it takes them, if you go to the next slide, please. Oh, maybe you already did. Can you go? Yeah, there's the slide I was looking for. So in the far right corner, that's the Pharos unit, and it's about the size of a cell phone. You see it in the box on the bottom right in that box. It's about the size of a large cell phone, and there's that color wheel in there, and you can literally move that color wheel to any position. So this would give that view on a non-network PC that is connected to the Wi-Fi of this system, and they would be able to change the colors. So it wouldn't be unusual to take 5 or 10 minutes to change all 5 structures versus 2.5 to 3 hours. And sometimes we have to go back because the programming didn't work. This would be a huge, huge improvement. Next slide, please. So I did get pricing. I was speaking with Jabit today. We just got the quote from Pharos. Pharos Cloud is $3,675 for 5 years of cloud service. So I think if my math is right, that's like $20 a month to have this feature. Now that's not all. We have to pay to have this system installed, and we have to still buy routers for each of these. So the cost of the hardware and all of that, Jabit thinks they can do that certainly less than $10,000 to $15,000 for all the hardware that we would need. It may be significantly less than that. What we do end up with is we have to pay for the 5 routers, a monthly fee. I just estimated $40 per router. I don't know if that's what we're going to get in pricing. It might be slightly more. But so you have 5 of those, so you're looking at $200 a month. And because we don't have to buy the mini PCs, we would save $2,500. So the $3,675 actually is a little bit cheaper with not having to buy the mini PCs. That would only be first year costs because that's what it would cost. And then last slide, please. So what we're hoping to do, as I mentioned, we talked with the temple and we spoke with the master developers. We are hoping that you could provide some feedback to us on 1, the temple parking lot, 2, the City Light stage structures, and 3, the overhead structures. And for all of those, we can take the necessary steps to move this forward. Like, for example, the parking lot, we would want to do a shared use agreement with the temple. So we would have to negotiate that shared use agreement, and then we would solicit bids for the project as an example. The only one that would likely be sole source is we need Pharos to be able to link up with our system, and we would recommend using Jabit because it's a local computer company, and he was able to find a solution for us. And with that, I'll happily answer
running
questions.
short on time. We have about 5 minutes is all before we probably have to break for our 4 o'clock meeting. I'll start to my left with questions or comments.
I'll keep mine simple. I would go for the 2 projects first that I think are vital. One is the parking lot at the temple, and the lights. It's just unreasonable to think we're going to put you through all that. If you can do it in 10 minutes, I mean, that's an easy fix. And then you have time, whatever money's left over, and figure out something for the plaza.
Thank you.
Commissioner.
It's pretty much echoes Commissioner Davis's perspective on it. Architecturally speaking, I do like the sun sail. I do have a kind of a residential version of it in my backyard for my patio, and it's extremely cost-effective, does what it's supposed to. Longevity, I'm impressed by the 10-year lifespan, because I think maybe if I get 2 out of mine, I'll be lucky. But if we have the funding for the Sun Sale project, I'm all for it.
And I'm going to look at Commissioner Davis. When you talked about parking lot, were you talking about the parking lot with the sale with the overhead structures instead of the temple parking lot? You said parking lot.
Do the temple, get that out the way. And then, because I think we have flexibility on the pricing at the City Lights Plaza.
Okay.
Well, the overhead lights, it should have been engineered into that to begin with. Sorry that oversight happened. See all the lights that they do, like we saw at Union Station over the weekend. It's incredible what they do. The sale idea, I like the solar idea, but that is cost prohibitive. But I do like that kind of design. I think the artistic design to it would add a lot to the. And something does need to be done there for shade. But I would still go ahead and take them down in the wintertime. The parking lot, that's probably a viable long-term expenditure. So, yeah, I think they're all good ideas, and we move forward.
Thank you.
Couple of questions. I'll look at staff. On the star bonds, who actually controls those funds? Is it the master developer, or is it actually us, the city?
So it is actually us.
Okay. I still would like to see, I know you met with the master developer, but we wouldn't have the star bonds without them, so I'd really like them to have a little more input into this besides, and I guess I'm going to take a different stance than a couple of you as far as what I see as being, I agree with Commissioner Longbine that this is too bad this wasn't done originally with the overhead structures, but I do think that saves staff time, and to be able to use those more efficiently, I think we need to do that. As far as which gets used most, I think the city light stage would be used a lot more if we had the overhead structures, whether it's for farmers market, whether it's for concerts. That would be high on my list. On the temple, we did $75,000 for the roof. Did the temple, did they share in that cost? And I see some heads bobbing yes. So I would probably, if I was going to do the temple parking lot, I would probably expect some participation from them. I don't think that's a city or a star bond. There's some structures downtown that facades need upgraded if we're going to have things look good. And what's keeping us from doing that? I think that parking lot, to me, that needs to be a shared cost between us and the temple. That's just my thoughts. That's
You have Commissioner Ryan on stage.
okay. Yeah, I'm going to, Commissioner Ryan, do you want to weigh in?
If I can get myself unmuted here, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess I'm basically agreeing with what I've heard. I think the overhead lights are first, the overhead structures are second for the usage they can bring to that area, and then the temple parking lot. I'm okay if the funding's there, that cost ought to be shared, but if the money was available, it'd be nice to.
Okay, I think he had the temple third. Is that what I heard?
I think that's what I understood.
Okay, that's what, yeah, so.
Did that come through?
Yeah, you kind of broke up on us, so.
Okay, so it seems like we have consensus that we'll go ahead and do the overhead structure lights and get that
Right.
knocked out. And then not necessarily consensus, seemed like it was 3-2 on Temple parking lot at this point, and then 3-2 flop for the shade structures.
Yeah, but I would like the master developer to enter into, that conversation a little more. They might, as far as setting the priority also, because they're the ones that really put this downtown project together, and I would probably yield to them a little bit on their order of priorities also.
Yeah.
I'll certainly discuss it with them, but the streetscape was actually our part. I mean, not that I would do it blindly without discussing it, but they were ever so eager to let us handle that part, so.
So we probably muddied the waters for you now, didn't we?
Yeah.
So,
Pretty good. Okay, well, we'll move forward with the lights, and I guess we'll have some more conversations about the parking lot
okay.
and the rest of it.
We'll break and be back at 4 o'clock for the commission meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, it is 4 o'clock. I will call the May 1st, 2023 Salina City Commission meeting to order. I would look to staff for confirmation of the Kansas Open Meeting Act. Required notice has been properly provided.
Yes.
Thank you. With that, we will do roll call.
Mayor Hoppick,
Here?
Commissioner Davis,
Here.
Commissioner Lenkowitz,
Here.
Commissioner Longbine,
Here.
Commissioner Ryan.
Yep, I see he's here. Well, he's online, so that's
I see him.
all 5 commissioners are here. Will those who are please able stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, before we get to words and proclamations, I do have one thing. I want everyone to know that today is Commissioner Longbine's birthday, so he's sharing his birthday with us. So thank you very much, and happy birthday, Bill.
Thank you.
So, okay, now we got the important stuff out of the way. We can move on. So, we'll try to get you out of here so you and your wife can maybe enjoy a dinner
Maybe.
tonight. Maybe. So, okay, that'll lead us to words and proclamations.
Item 3.1, recognition of the month of May 2023 as National Bike Month in the city of Salina. Terrell Grinter, OCCK Transportation Director, will read the proclamation.
Hi, Terrell Grinter, OCCK Director of Transportation. Bike Month Proclamation, the City of Salina, Kansas. Whereas the bicycle is an economical, healthy, convenient, and environmentally sound form of transportation and an excellent tool for recreation and enjoyment of Salina's neighborhoods. And whereas throughout the month of May, the residents of Salina and its visitors will experience the joys of bicycling through group rides, educational programs, commuting events, or by getting out and going for a ride. And whereas the city of Salina recognizes the bicycle as a legitimate roadway vehicle, which is entitled to legal and responsible use of all public roadway facilities in Kansas except highways constructed to interstate standards. And whereas the city of Salina recognizes the use of bicycles as a viable mode of transportation, endeavors to promote safe and responsible bicycling, and is committed to incorporating the development of bicycle facilities in its strategic plan and comprehensive plan. And whereas creating bicycle-friendly communities has been shown to improve citizens' health, well-being, and quality of life, to boost community spirit, to improve traffic safety, and to reduce pollution, congestion, and wear and tear on streets and roads. Whereas May has been declared National Bike Month for each of the last 67 years and is so again in 2023. And whereas the League of American Bicyclists, the Parks and Recreation Department, and other city departments and local bicycle clubs, schools, hospitals, companies, and civic groups throughout Kansas will be promoting bicycling as a leisure activity, as well as an environmentally friendly alternative to the automobile during the month of May 2023. And whereas the education of bicyclists and motorists as to the proper and safe operation of bicycles is important to ensure the safety and comfort of all users. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the members of the governing body of the City of Salina hereby recognize the month of May 2023 as National Bike Month and Bicycle Safety Month, and the week of May 15 through 21, 2023 as Bike to Work Week, and Friday, May 19th, 2023 as Bike to Work Day in Salina. Be it further resolved that the governing body of the City of Salina urges all who support bicycling to participate in the events planned and urges all road users to share the road safely with bicyclists. Dated this first day of May, 2023.
Thank you very much. Could you maybe give us some ways in which OCCK is educating and helping to get the public aware of the benefits of bicycle riding?
Absolutely. I'm going to invite Michelle Griffin up to share exactly that and some other ways that you can be involved this month.
Thank you.
Hi, Michelle Griffin, Mobility Manager for North Central Kansas. And I'm glad you asked that question because we have just a few things. So I have Kyson with me. This is his first city commission meeting. So he was a little nervous, but I told him it's not scary. So he's going to help me. We have a biking safety bag for each of you. So you can carry this backpack on your back when you're biking. It's yellow to increase your visibility. Inside of it, you've got sunglasses to protect your eyes. You've got a koozie to keep your water bottle cold while you're traveling. And then you've got a flashlight and some other things to keep you safe while you're bicycling. So he's going to pass those out.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And then we've, as Charles mentioned, so May is Bike Month. We've got activities happening all across the state of Kansas. So as mobility managers, we work together to promote all of those items. So you can go to the Kansas Rides website and look at all of the Bike Month activities happening across the state. I do have a short little to-do list, and I'll give one of these to each of you also for the month of May. So make sure that you ride your bike on May 7th. We have a partnership with Ad Astra Books and Coffee House for a 10% discount for anyone that rides a bike. If you don't have a bike and you need to borrow one, you can ride Can Cycle, which is our local bike sharing program, and you can have free rides for the entire month of May. We are working with local school districts to encourage kids to ride their bikes to school on May 3rd. Like we mentioned, Bike to Work Day is on May 19th, and so we encourage you to participate in that. I know there's a couple of city employees that ride their bikes, and so we're looking forward to working with them on that. And then participating in just any other area events that are happening. So we do a lot, try to encourage participation in biking, walking, any type of multimodal transportation. So.
And do you know, do the school districts do educational classes for kids that do ride their bikes to school? And all?
That's a great question. I'm not sure. I haven't heard of anything personally, but we'd be happy to reach out to them.
Just know that would be important. So.
Yes.
Well, thank you for being here and sharing. I know as I get older, I need one of these that says slow-moving vehicle. So, so anyway, I do have a proclamation if you guys would like to come forward, and let's have, I'm sorry I missed his name.
Tyson.
Tyson, come up here also.
Can you keep the wind under 20 mile an hour in the month of May?
No guarantees for that.
Hopefully it's pushing it downhill.
Tyson, turn around there and smile for the camera. Thank you guys for being with us.
Thank you.
Good job, Tyson.
Thanks.
Okay, that will bring us to consent agenda.
Item 5.1, approve the minutes of the meeting of April 24, 2023.
Are there any corrections or additions? If not, I'll accept a motion.
Move we accept the consent agenda?
Second.
We have a motion and second to approve consent agenda item 5.1. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, that passes. That will lead us to item 6.1.
Item 6.1, authorize the purchase of an IQ 640 emergency medical supply vending system and 36-door locker from Vinnovation LLC in the amount of $37,845.
Go ahead.
Mayor Hoppick, Commissioners, Shane Pearson, Deputy Chief, Salina Fire Department. Before you use a consideration to purchase, as stated, IQ 640 emergency medical supply vending system and a 36-door locker system from Vinnovation in the amount of $37,845. The background on this item, for over 10 years, the Salina Fire Department has utilized a vending system from Vendovation LLC for controlled distribution of all medications and many of our disposable medical supplies, such as IV needles, airway management supplies, bandaging supplies, and replacement EKG electrodes and supplies for our cardiac monitors. The system controls access to supplies and maintains a real-time transaction record with audit logs for accountability. We're able to track by either the item itself or the employee who accessed the vending system what items were distributed and what EMS call the item was used on. Each department employee has a specific PIN, or personal identification number, that is used to access the vending system. Employees who are not authorized to handle or administer controlled substances are not allowed to dispense that controlled item themselves. Once the department receives the supplies from our medical supply vendors, they're placed into the vending system. The vending system then allows for tracking and complete accountability for items used, as well as reducing waste. This is all accomplished while meeting FDA and DEA regulations for narcotic and medication control and chain of custody. The vending system provides for accurate supply inventory tracking process and allows authorized department staff the ability to track the inventory of supplies. And the current vending system has exceeded its useful life, and while still functional is unreliable. Replacement parts for the current system, even if they are available, are typically back-ordered as the system has become outdated. The proposed system is also compatible with medication vaults that will soon be utilized on all 7 ambulances. The new vending system, in conjunction with the medication vault in each ambulance, will allow for continuity of accountability from the point of distribution from the vending system to storage on the ambulance to administration to a patient and ultimately restocking of medications and supplies after an EMS-related incident. The cost of the vending system itself, just the vending machine, is $25,845. The staff is also requesting to purchase a 36-door locker assembly at an additional cost of $12,000. This assembly will replace a set of wooden supply cabinets that are currently not connected to the vending system. The wood cabinets are approximately 10 years old and are in well-used condition. The current wood storage cabinets routinely have to have the locks and hinges repaired and are occasionally inadvertently left unlocked. While there are no DEA-controlled supplies in any of the wood cabinets, it does leave a potential for supplies to be removed without the knowledge to fire department staff. The additional lockers will add another layer of security as well as inventory management for our EMS supplies. The Salina Fire Department requests authorization to purchase the updated system from Vendovation following the City of Salina's single source purchasing policy, referencing Section 9, line number 4, and the policy states for a continuation of an existing project or continuity of similar services in which the past performance is considered acceptable and knowledge of the specific work has been demonstrated. Factors included for the consideration for authorization to follow single source policy. The fire department has an established working relationship with Vendovation with the current vending system. Web-based software is already established and does not need to be updated. The new vending system utilizes the same web-based software for all tracking and reports. User profiles are already established within the current software, and this allows for continuity as there is essentially no training necessary for personnel that already use the Vendovation system. $25,000 was initially approved in the 2023 sub-CIP request to replace the vending system. The cost of the vending system, again, is $25,485, and the additional 36-door locker assembly is $12,000, bringing the total cost of the purchase to $37,845. Approval through the Finance Department was obtained to address the increased cost, and the EMS equipment line item in the Fire Department's operating budget could also absorb the increase in cost of the system. The recommended action, authorize the purchase of an IQ 640 emergency medical supply vending system and 36-door locker assembly from Vendovation LLC in the amount of $37,845, utilizing the city's single source policy. As an alternative, authorize the purchase from Vendovation LLC with amendments as the City Commission deems appropriate. Alternately, postpone the consideration of the proposed purchase to a specified date and time, provide staff direction regarding additional information or amendments to the City Commission. Would like to request for further consideration or finally, take no action and in effect disapprove the proposed purchase. Staff is recommending option number 1. I'll answer any questions you may have.
We'll start to my right with Commissioner Linkwitz.
No questions.
Commissioner Longvine?
This is going to replace an existing vending system.
Correct. We
Correct.
currently have a vending system. It's well over 10 years old, from the same company that was established, I believe, back when Greg Brockway was the EMS chief here, was when that was initially purchased. And the system has just become outdated. They've made advances in technology, upgrades to the current system that's a lot more user-friendly, easier to replace parts when they do break. Sometimes the coils or the mechanisms inside the machine will break, and it's very difficult to get additional parts for those because they've essentially outdated and have moved on to new technology in the manufacturing process.
So will the old system have any value or
No,
Is-
very little, if any.
be junked? Okay.
To the point they're not offering any kind of a trade-in value for it or anything at that. They're willing to take it, but there's no trade-in value even with the current
If
system.
it could, someone else could use it.
Firewood.
And this will be housed at Station 1?
Actually, it'll be housed at Salina Regional Health Center. That's where the current system's at. That's where it's been in place. There's an agreement in place with the hospital. They allow us to keep the machine there. It's not tied into any of their working systems or their internet. It is controlled by wireless technology and Wi-Fi, but we've got a process in place through computer technology here that utilizes a cellular modem, just like the rest of our ambulances and fire apparatus do, to control the internet for that. So there's no burden or anything on the hospital to
EMS, when
manage
they
that.
complete a run,
So,
they know
yep,
what
when they're finished with a
they
call,
need to
they can
replace.
restock right
Yeah.
there. They don't have to relocate to a station. We don't have to have multiple supplies. That's part of the waste reducing process, is that everything's housed at one location. They can restock at one location rather than trying to keep supplies at all 4 fire stations.
Will the locker be there? Housed?
Yeah, everything will be housed right there.
Yep, great way to keep track of inventory.
It is.
And
Is there a code that they have to enter so you know what?
Yes, the personal ID number, that
Right.
PIN number,
So-
each employee has their own PIN number. So it is, anybody gets it, myself or any of the EMS supervisors log into the system to run a report, we can see exactly which employee got into the system at what point in time,
So-
what was dispensed.
And so this also allows you to keep track of inventory so you can control
Correct.
your inventory.
Yeah, we
and
can
all
see
that.
if they needed 2 IV needles,
Yep.
that was dispensed out of that system, or medications the same way.
And gives you a balance of
assigns
what's
what EMS run number that medication was utilized and used for.
Sounds very useful. Okay, are there any comments or questions from the public?
Commissioner Ryan.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Ryan. Do you have any questions or comments? He's still muted, so he's still, no, okay. Hand gestures look like they may work real well today. We'll find out, so.
I had one more I thought of. Who stocks the machine?
One of the EMS supervisors, typically there's one of the EMS supervisors on shift 2 is kind of oversees all of our inventory and supplies and orders most of the majority of our supplies. He does the majority of that stocking, but any of the other EMS supervisors have the access to go in and restock supplies into the machine.
Okay, any questions or comments from the public? Okay, if not, I'll bring it back to the commission for action.
Mayor, I move we authorize the purchase of an IQ 640 emergency medical supply vending system and 36-door locker from Vendonation LLC in the amount of $37,845, utilizing the city's single source purchasing policy.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to authorize the purchase of an IQ 640 emergency medical supply vending system and 36-door locker from Vendovation LLC in the amount of $37,845. All those in favor? Aye. Nay? No? And we got a thumbs up
Thumbs
from Commissioner Ryan, so that passes 5-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. That will lead us to development business, item 7.1.
Item 7.1, approve resolution number 23-8127, supporting a request from the State Historic Preservation Office for comments on the eligibility of Peters Science Hall on the Kansas Wesleyan University campus for potential listing on the National Register of Historic Places and the Register of Historic Kansas Places.
Okay, and I believe Mr. Andrews is online.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
I apologize for not being there in person. I'm recovering from surgery and I'm not doing stairs. I'm staying upstairs. This item, Kansas Wesleyan University has been working with Brenda Spencer with Spencer Preservation, and Brenda specializes in producing National Register nominations for various properties around the state. And she's been working on a nomination for Peters Science Hall on the Kansas Wesleyan campus. And so staff received a notice from the State Historic Preservation Office and a copy of the nomination form and a request that the local government provide comments on the nomination. The State Historic Sites Review Board is scheduled to consider this item on Saturday, May 6th. So they're wanting to get our comments ahead of that meeting. I did want to note that on all the correspondence that we received from the state and the nomination form itself, for whatever reason, it used an address of 124 East Cloud, which is actually on the south side of the street, and the correct address for Peters Science Hall is 131 East Cloud. This is a building that anchors the southeast corner of the Kansas Wesleyan campus. It was completed in 1969, and it is emblematic of what's known as the modern movement style academic facility. And the building itself is distinguished by having a 4-story height and has a rooftop observatory dome, and its white concrete facades have vertical slot windows on essentially a rectangular red brick building. So this nomination form has been prepared by Kansas Wesleyan and the consultant to try to demonstrate the significance of this historic resource and to make this resource eligible for financial incentives to restore and rehabilitate the building. And those types of incentives include the use of state and federal rehabilitation tax credits. The City of Salina is part of the state certified local government program, which authorizes us to do our reviews locally instead of sending them up to the State Historic Preservation Office. And currently, the city has 15 properties that are listed on the National Register, and the most recent addition was one that the commission reviewed in the fall, which was the addition of Pioneer Hall on Kansas Wesleyan's campus to the National Register. We've also recently added the National Bank of America, the Norton Apartments on East Iron, the Lowell School Building, and prior to that, the Christ Cathedral and H.D. Lee buildings were all put on that National Register. On July 23, 2018, there was a resolution approved by the City Commission recommending the listing of former St. John's Hospital on the National Register, and that property went to the State Historic Sites Board of Review, and they recommended placement on the State Register, but that property has yet to be placed on the National Register of Historic Places. And there's been a change in ownership, so staff is unsure about what the plans are of the current owner to move forward with that. But the current status of the St. John's Hospital is, although it was nominated, it has not been added to the National Register of Historic Places. So as a general rule, a resource or building has to be at least 50 years old to be eligible and to have attained significance through their association with the early development of a community or a building that is well a preserved example of a particular style of building technique. And so the eligibility is for both state and federal tax credits if it is listed, and that can add up to 45% in tax credits. So the city has just recently renewed our local government agreement with the State Historic Preservation Office, and we are required to submit a report or comment on any nominations that are made within our jurisdiction. And so if there were a designation of Peters Science Hall, then that would assure a protective review of any projects that might affect the character defining feature of that building. It doesn't have any impact on surrounding properties or activities on surrounding property, only on the protected property itself. So if there were a proposal at some point in the future for a demolition or removal of a national or state registered property, that would require local review and approval of a certificate of appropriateness by the Heritage Commission. And should the Heritage Commission make a decision that either the applicant or citizens in the community are not in agreement with, then any applicant or any dissatisfied person with the Heritage Commission's decision can appeal that decision to the City Commission. So we believe the primary motivation for this is to make it eligible for tax credits. As we noted, this building was financed and designed and built in the middle 60s. And so it is over 50 years old. As part of the 90th birthday celebration for Professor F.C. Peters, it was decided to name the new building in his honor. And so that's why it's known as the Frederick Conrad Peters Hall of Science. It was dedicated in 1969, and there was an observatory added in 1970. There is also an association with this building with the local design firm Wilson & Company, and we provided some information about the history of Wilson & Company, which was started in Salina and has now been in business for 90 years. As far as the architectural significance, it's mostly the fact that this property has not been significantly modified, and it retains a high degree of integrity from its original 1960s design. So one of the distinguishing features obviously is the observatory on the roof and the narrow concrete windows, which were emblematic of that 1960s period. The only modifications that have been made to the building since its construction is that there was a greenhouse dome on the roof of the building, and that has been removed. And then there's been some site alterations on the east side where 4th Street was closed and vacated. The Heritage Commission conducted a hearing on this request on April 12th, 2023, and they recommended inclusion of this property on the state and national register of historic places. And they made 4 findings in support of that, which are on page 10 of your report, and which have been incorporated into a resolution that's attached to your packet. So if you concur with the recommendation of the Salina Heritage Commission, finding that the Peters Science Hall meets the applicable criteria for eligibility, you should approve the attached resolution and direct staff to submit that resolution of support to the State Historic Preservation Office. Or in the alternative, you could decline to approve the attached resolution. So with that, I'd be open to any questions that you have about Peters Science Hall.
Okay, I will start to my left.
No questions.
Question?
Well, I kind of struggled with this. I watched this building being built. I was 10 years old when it opened. I don't know how that's historic.
I've been struggling with that myself. How can a building built during my lifetime be historic? But
Yeah. It is what it is.
It is over 50 years old and it meets the criteria. And there are a number of 1960s buildings that are now being added to the National Register around the nation.
Just keep hoping you have those birthdays. You'll keep adding more buildings to that.
Maybe one will be named after me someday.
Commissioner.
No questions.
Okay. I have none either. Are there any questions or comments from the public?
Carl.
Oh, Carl, any comments? I'm going to take that as a no, so, okay. Any questions or comments from the public? Okay, if not, I will bring it back to the commission for action.
Mayor, I move that we concur with, actually, we do have a resolution number. Be easier that way. Move that we approve resolution number 23-8127, supporting a request from the State Historic Preservation Office for comments on the eligibility of Peters Science Hall on the Kansas Wesleyan University campus for potential listing on the National Register of Historic Places and the Register of Historic Kansas Places.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve resolution number 23-8127, supporting the request from the State Historic Preservation Office as to Peters Science Hall on the Kansas Wesleyan University campus. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Mr. Ryan gave us a thumbs up, so that's 5-0. Thank you very much. That will lead us to item 7.2.
Item 7.2, consider the acceptance of the offered street right-of-way and easement dedications from Overlook Estates LLC to serve the Overlook Estates Addition, a proposed 11-lot subdivision on a 52.90-acre tract of land located south of River Run Addition and west of Great Life Golf and Fitness.
Okay, before I turn it over to Mr. Andrew, I believe.
Yeah, I think Mr. Bankston's going to make a preliminary introduction of
Thank you.
special counsel on this topic.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Jackie Butler, who will be assisting you on these next two agenda items related to the Overlook Estates. You'll recall the situation where one of my partners is a resident of River Run, and not knowing exactly what issues might be involved, but to avoid any appearance of a conflict or appearance of bias, we appreciated that you authorized Mr. Scragg to engage Ms. Butler to assist staff, the Planning Commission, and you all today as you consider this matter. For the benefit of anyone who might be observing, Ms. Butler is currently an attorney with the Wichita law firm of Adams Jones and has formerly served for a number of years as Derby's city attorney and has also contributed significantly to the education of municipal lawyers and others through the League of Kansas Municipalities and the City Attorneys Association in the areas of annexation, zoning, and land use. So I appreciate that she was able to be of assistance to us.
Ms. Butler, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
Okay, with that, do you have any opening comments or turn it over to Mr. Andrew?
Yeah, I think we'll turn it over to Mr. Andrew.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm going to refer to this starting out as overall the River Run residential development, because that's what it was conceived as originally. And the Veneer family had a horse farm and horse stables at the south end of Marymount Road. And in 2003, they conceived of converting that from stables and a horse farm to a residential subdivision. And so the Veneer family approached the city of Salina in early 2003 about annexing their 94-acre property at the south end of Marymount Road into the city to develop a residential subdivision with full city services instead of a county-type rural housing area. And at that time, Marymount Road was a narrow blacktop road that led to the Elks Club, and Cloud Street was a gravel road that ran from Markley Road along the north edge of the golf course over to Marymount. The Veneer family retained the services of landscape architect and land planner with HNTB of Kansas City to prepare a preliminary development plan or master plan for the 94-acre property. This land planner was the same landscape architect and land planner who had designed and laid out the Colbert Hills development in Manhattan, also owned by the Veneer family. It was identified early on that the River Run property was challenging and unique due to the fact that it's bordered by Smoky Hill River Channel on the west, a river cutoff channel on two sides, and an existing golf course on the east. There was also a ravine that ran along the west side of Marymount Road, so the existing driveway to the farm opposite Cloud Street was identified as the most suitable street access point to the development. As the master plan for the 94-acre tract of land was presented, Mr. Veneer requested two variations. One was a variation to the maximum length of a dead-end cul-de-sac street, and the other was a variation due to topography to require sidewalks to be constructed on both sides, but that they only be required on one side of the public streets in the subdivision. And so the original concept for Overlook Drive, that roadway extended 29 feet into the subdivision, 3,400 feet if the River Run Parkway was included. So the city subdivision regulations have a provision dealing with dead-end streets that state that ordinarily the maximum length of a cul-de-sac street shall be 600 feet, but the subdivision regulations also provide the Planning Commission with authority to grant variations to strict compliance with those standards if there are particular hardships or practical difficulties resulting from that strict compliance. And so it sets out some factors and findings that the Planning Commission is required to consider. And so the two things that were looked at in 2003 were that this is a unique property, it's relatively landlocked, and it has a unique shape and a very unique topography. There's an old cutoff channel for the Smoky Hill River on the south. On the west, you have the Smoky Hill River itself. You had existing home sites on the north, and you had the Elks Club, which ran the entire length of the eastern boundary of the property. So that left Marymount as the only potential street access, and the choice of access points was limited by a drainage channel and pond just to the west of Marymount. A third extenuating factor was something that was already in the works, and it had been approved by the city and county commissions, and that was approval of the Mariposa Master Plan. That Mariposa Master Plan called for the elimination of Cloud Street and the construction of a substitute connection between Marymount and Cloud, first known as Mariposa Drive, now known as Cedar Ridge Drive. This improved the overall circulation in the area, but eliminated an access route to the entrance of River Run. So on March 18th, 2003, the Planning Commission approved preliminary plat and development plan, and they also approved variations to the subdivision regulations. Planning Commission does not have the authority to grant variations to the fire code. However, there were no uniform fire code provisions dealing with subdivision access at the time that River Run was reviewed and approved in 2003. So at the time, the city was under the Uniform Fire Code, which did not have any language or sections in it dealing with subdivision access. So the only public street access to the River Run property in total is River Run Parkway that connects with Marymount Road opposite Edgewood Drive at the north entrance to Great Life Golf and Fitness. There is a roundabout at that intersection. There is a divided entryway into the subdivision. And so this section of River Run Parkway was designed to be wider than a standard residential street. It was also designed to be divided. And so River Run Parkway is the entry boulevard into the subdivision. It has 75 feet of right-of-way and approximately 40 feet of paving, 20 feet on each side. There's a traffic circle at the intersection of River Run Parkway and Overlook Drive, about 540 feet east of Marymount Road. And so Overlook Drive serves as the internal collector within the subdivision. The right-of-way inside the subdivision is 50 feet with 29 feet of paving on the streets. So as it stands today, Overlook Drive is essentially a dead-end street that terminates where Phase 1 and Phase 2 were supposed to match up. Marymount Road is the only entrance into this area, which is what prompted the construction in 2004 of Edgewood Drive, and that provides a second public street connection back to Cedar Ridge Drive and provides an alternate route to reach the subdivision from Fire Station number 4. So back in 2003, again, there was no fire code provisions in place, but in looking at it to mitigate concerns about having a second way into the development for emergency vehicles, if the River Run Parkway entrance at Marymount Road should be blocked, the developer constructed a secondary emergency access entrance from the Elks Club parking lot, now Great Life Golf and Fitness, over to Overlook Drive in Phase 1 of the development. This was not a code requirement at the time of construction, but was added as a condition upon the recommendation of the Salina Fire Department. This emergency access road is located just south of the former townhome area, about 1,130 feet south of the subdivision entrance. At the time, the city staff asked the applicant to modify the plat to reserve that not only as a access easement, but as a potential reserve strip for right-of-way should there ever be a second street connection to the Elks Club property. So at the time, the concern of the Salina Fire Department was how they would access the interior of River Run if River Run Parkway was blocked. The purpose of the secondary emergency access was to provide a separate fire apparatus access road in the event that River Run Parkway became blocked west of Marymount Road. The River Run Parkway was designed as a boulevard entry to try to reduce the likelihood that it would be entirely blocked. So Mr. Veneer ended up not final platting the entire 94 acres. The emergency access road was required to be designed and built as part of Phase 1. In your lengthy packets there is a copy of the design plans prepared by Cobb Valley Engineering for that emergency access road. It was built, inspected, and operational before any homes in Phase 1 were occupied. It was built to withstand the weight of a fire truck. Today, we've had some grass infill over the top of the gravel, and grass has grown in, but the integrity of the remote road remains, and it's gated with access available to the fire department for emergency situations. And then shortly after River Run being approved in 2003, Cedar Ridge Addition across the street was approved in 2004, and construction of Cedar Ridge Drive was completed as part of Phase 1 of Cedar Ridge Drive. So there was a proposed replat of Lot 1, Block 5 submitted in 2010. And at that time, the city of Salina was under the 2006 International Fire Code. City staff did not perform a new and independent fire code analysis because the subdivision access points were already established and approved, and the developer was just reconfiguring existing platted property that he already had a vested right to develop and for which the city had already issued building permits. The other thing of note is that this replat resulted in a substantial reduction in the number of dwelling units in this block. So staff did not believe it had the legal authority to impose new regulations on a property that was part of the original 2003 plat. All the streets and utilities and the secondary access road were already in place when this property was replatted. So if we look at the status of the property today, the Planning Commission made a recommendation to change the zoning of the property from agricultural to planned development, single-family residential on August 2nd, 2022. At their September 26th meeting, the City Commission concurred with that recommendation and voted to approve an ordinance rezoning the property on first reading, with second reading held in abeyance until the property is final platted. And so second reading is on the agenda today as item 7.3. At the September 6th meeting, the Planning Commission also considered the developer's application for approval of the preliminary plat to create an 11-lot subdivision south of the existing River Run Addition and west of Great Life Golf and Fitness. The Planning Commission voted 6-0 to approve the preliminary plat, subject to 8 conditions. 2 of those were addressed on the final plat. 6 of those were carried over as conditions as part of the final plat approval. So we have new owners and developers. We have Overlook Estates, which is Derek Lee, North MacArthur, and Debbie DiBiase have purchased the remainder of River Run Phase 2 from Veneer Properties, or Mr. Rex Veneer, except for the 29+ acre common area down along the river, which was retained by Veneer Properties. They have filed an application requesting approval of a final plat of the second phase of River Run, and it would be platted and known as Overlook Estates Addition. While the original plat for this area showed 36 lots, this has been reduced to 11 large estate-type lots for new single-family home construction. The areas outside the lots would be common area for use of subdivision residents. There's an extension of Overlook Drive proposed, which is a public street and would be a public street within the subdivision. The proposed length of Overlook Drive is substantially reduced under the revised plat layout. And so the proposed street right-of-way, utility easement dedications, and street and utility extensions are shown on the preliminary infrastructure plan. So the following changes have occurred since the fall of 2022. The original proposed name of the subdivision was River Run Estates. It's now been changed to Overlook Estates. The developers are proposing to separate themselves from the River Run Homeowners Association and form their own Overlook Estates Homeowners Association with their own set of covenants. The developers are proposing a reciprocal grant of common easement and maintenance agreement between Overlook Estates HOA and River Run HOA to jointly use and manage the 29.15 acre common area along the river. Mr. Veneer has transferred title of that common area from Veneer Properties to the River Run HOA, although I would note that Mr. Veneer is the sole member of the River Run HOA. The proposed benefit district that was discussed for the off-site water line extension over to Markley Road now only includes Overlook Estates Addition and county properties to the south, and does not include any of the lots in River Run Addition. So if the off-site water link is constructed, no one in the original River Run Addition would face any costs or assessments for that. The final item is that all new homes in Overlook Estates will be sprinklered. And the International Fire Code, the 2012 version, contains an exception for developments where all homes will be sprinkled that only requires one point of access if all the homes are sprinkled, and we'll get into that a little more deeply. So as far as the subdivision design, the subdivision regulations were amended in 2016 and require that subdivisions abut or have frontage on a direct access perimeter street and have at least one public street access point on that direct access perimeter street. So the direct access perimeter street in this case is Marymount Road, and the one public street access point on that is River Run Parkway. And so it also directs the Planning Commission to look at other factors that might create the need for or justification for an additional public street connection. And those include safe and convenient movement of traffic within the subdivision or between adjoining subdivisions, the safe and convenient movement of traffic to and from the subdivision via the existing system of thoroughfares and dedicated right-of-ways, and access to and within the subdivision for fire and other public safety vehicles and equipment. So River Run was approved prior to this 2016 text amendment to the subdivision regulations, and it was approved prior to the current fire code being adopted. Section D107 of the current fire code states that in developments with more than 30 dwellings on a single public street, a separate and approved fire access road must be provided. This fire apparatus road must be separated from the primary access by a distance equal to not less than 1/2 the maximum diagonal distance of the area to be served. This provision was not in place when the River Run Addition was platted in 2003. The location of that access point was chosen as being the best location from an access and topography standpoint. So the existing River Run Addition has one public street access point and a secondary emergency access road at the south end of Overlook Drive as it exists today that connects to the Great Life Golf and Fitness parking lot. This provides a second means of access into the subdivision. This is 1,130 feet remote from the public street entrance. This access point was included in the property purchased by Overlook Estates, but they are planning to leave it in place with a realignment to connect to their new street connection. And additionally, in recognition of concern related to access within the development, the developers of Overlook Estates have volunteered to add sprinkler requirement enforceable through covenants for all homes in the development. The 2005 International Fire Code Exception D identifies sprinklers as a viable alternative to the requirement that a development with over 30 dwelling units be served by a secondary access road. So again, that is discussed in separate handouts attached to the report. And so one possible interpretation is that this is a development, it only has 11 lots, so it only needs a single access point. This is countered by the fact that phase 2 is really an extension or expansion of an existing subdivision, which you have to drive through to get to this 11 lot subdivision. So under Kansas law, a vested right exists and it occurs with the recording of the final plat. Because phase 2 has not been final platted, staff is operating under the assumption that Overlook Estates has no vested right to develop phase 2, and phase 2 is subject to the provisions of the current adopted fire code as well as the city's subdivision regulations. So the city subdivision regulations were amended, and city subdivision regulations require a minimum of one public street access directly from an abutting perimeter street, and if required by the International Fire Code, one fire apparatus access road directly from an abutting perimeter street. So staff believes the following findings can be made in support of a single public access point for River Run and Overlook Estates. Properties at the south end of Marymount Road. It's bordered by a golf course and country club, and Old River Oxbow, and the Smoky Hill River channel. Existing topographical barriers and the configuration of developers' ownership prevents the development of alternative circulation systems and necessitates a long cul-de-sac design. The original master plan proposed 113 dwelling units. That's the 2003 plan, with 106 of those feeding onto River Run Parkway. There was a traffic study done by a licensed engineer at that time, which determined that River Run Parkway had adequate capacity to accommodate all the traffic generated by that development. However, the 2011 replat combined with this proposed replat reduces the projected traffic volumes on River Run Parkway by 40%. Therefore, the traffic volumes do not necessitate an additional access point. Because the developers are proposing to sprinkle all the new homes, a second means of access into the development is not required by the fire code. This exception recognizes the effectiveness and reliability of properly designed and installed automatic sprinkler systems and mitigating the need to have two access points. So the plan for Overlook Estates was reviewed in accordance with this provision of the subdivision regulations. And so the staff reviewed the proposed plan for Overlook Estates with the developers. There were 4 different development review team meetings reviewing and discussing alternatives with the developers. City staff did determine that it would be counterproductive to move the emergency access road 300 feet to the south to strictly comply with the 1/2 diagonal distance requirement, because it would move the access farther away from the area being served, and the terrain and slope make it impractical to build a code-compliant access road. There's also existing buildings farther south on the Great Life property. So city staff believed in 2003 and still believes that the current location is the best location for providing secondary access into this area. We would also refer you to an attached written modification approved by the city's fire marshal. So we have 11 lots in phase 2. There's a potential for up to 54 dwellings in phase 1. So the total number of dwelling units served by River Run Parkway would be 65 dwellings. And that is down from 113 dwellings that was proposed in 2003. So again, as part of this request for Overlook Estates, there were 2 variations requested. One was for the maximum length of the dead-end street, and the other was a variance to the requirement that sidewalks be constructed on both sides of the public street. And so those were highlighted in the application. So as we looked at those 2 variations, we looked at some of the same factors. We look at the total length of the property, Smoky Hill River to the west, the natural slopes and drop-offs. The developer is very limited as to how to lay out lots and streets within the developable portions of this 94-acre tract. And then we have the relocation of Cloud Street, and then in response, the construction of Edgewood Drive. And so the Planning Commission made a number of findings related to the 2 variation requests, and that'll be summarized in their action. So there was a total of 11 lots proposed, a single lot. That has not changed. What has changed is the rear portion of Lot 1 is now proposed to be a common area, now labeled as Lot 12, and the meadow area is labeled as Lot 13. The lots meet all the minimum dimensional requirements of the R district. There will be some need for grading and leveling on lots 3 and 4 in order to issue permits to construct a home, and so this will require some creative site planning on behalf of the applicants. Some of the more rugged areas are proposed to be preserved and protected by conservation easements. So as far as our utilities, we have an 8-inch water line in Overlook Drive, which serves phase 1. This is tied into an 8-inch line in South Marymount Road. At the time that this development was proposed in 2003, it was recognized at some point there would be a need for an additional off-site water line connection to provide advanced fire flows and 2 sources of water supply. The Director of Utilities has directed has identified the 16-inch water line in Markley Road as the preferred off-site connection point in lieu of a connection to Magnolia Road. You have a map in your packet that shows that proposed extension and connection. There is an annexation agreement between the City of Salina and Veneer Properties that obligates the city to design and construct that loop water line connection, and it obligates property owners in River Run to participate in a benefit district. City of Salina has the responsibility to identify and choose the preferred route of the water line and to acquire the necessary easements. We've provided a supplemental report to this blue sheet that provides additional information about that off-site water line. The plan is to extend a 12-inch water line into the phase 2 area and then south through the south end of the property and tie it back into Markley Road. This will provide domestic service and fire protection service to the proposed lots. And so no construction can occur in phase 2 or the Overlook Estates Addition until that looped connection is in place. As far as sanitary sewer, there was a sewer lift station that was looked at as an option. That has now been abandoned. And so the plan is to design and install an 8-inch gravity sewer line that'll serve the upper 5 lots, and then the lots at the lower elevation will have their own private sewer ejector pumps that would pump into this gravity line. There's no longer a plan to construct a public or private lift station. As far as runoff, the runoff from this site will go into the old Smoky Hill River cutoff channel. There is, Evergy has overhead power line that crosses the property. This is a potential impediment to a couple lots at the end of Overlook Drive. We're working with Evergy on a relocation plan for that line, as well as with the owner of Great Life Golf and Fitness. So fire protection would be from Station 4 at Marymount and Crawford. This property is already in the city limits, and once the streets are built, then police protection would be provided by the city. This is in the Meadowlark, Lakewood, and Salina Central enrollment districts. Overlook Drive would be a public street and would be dedicated to the city for public maintenance. All utility and drainage easements shown on the plat would be dedicated public easements. There's also a 20-foot access easement proposed between lots 3 and 4 to provide access to the lower meadow area. All of the infrastructure serving this subdivision, including the offsite water line, would be constructed up front. There would be no phasing. The developers have submitted a step 1 application to utilize special assessment financing to finance the cost of public improvements. That have not been acted on or brought before the commission for action yet at this time. So we have a set of covenants for the River Run area, and it covers the entire 94-acre area. So phase 2 is currently subject to those covenants. The current developers are proposing to withdraw their property from the River Run HOA and create their own. They filed articles of incorporation and submitted bylaws, covenants, and restrictions for a separate and independently functioning Overlook Estates HOA. And then they've also proposed a reciprocal grant of common easement whereby the River Run HOA would own and manage the common area, and residents of Overlook Estates would have the right to access and use that area. They've also submitted some draft conservation easement language. So the Planning Commission met and reviewed this final plat. They determined that this was a subdivision that had a primary public street access and an approved secondary access location. So based on that and the written modification approved in writing by the fire marshal as to the remoteness of that secondary access point, the Planning Commission voted 6-1 to approve the final plat of Overlook Estates, including the 2 requested variations, and then subject to 10 conditions. So a couple of those that I wanted to point out. Condition number 2 requires that the second public water line connection to Markley Road be completed and operational before any vertical construction occurs in Overlook Estates. And condition number 4 requires that developers of Overlook Estates be responsible for constructing a relocated emergency access road in the alignment shown on the infrastructure plans and final plat. That reconstruction shall meet the standards and specifications of the adopted fire code and shall be completed and inspected prior to issuance of any building permits in Overlook Estates. One thing I wanted to point out is that the existing emergency access road was designed to support the weight of a fire truck, but because there was no fire code in place at the time, specifications were that it would be built 16 feet wide, which it is built at 16 feet in width, but that will have to be widened to 20 feet by the developers of Overlook Estates, as well as reinforcing any sections that need to be reinforced. And so those were 2 conditions. There was a condition 10 to carry out the intent of the developers to sprinkle all the homes in Overlook Estates. Condition number 10 required that all dwelling units have an approved automatic fire sprinkler system in accordance with NFPA as applicable or approved by the fire marshal. Following the Planning Commission meeting, in the course of doing some other building code research, it was discovered that there is a technical conflict with state statute. There was a statute passed by the state legislature which precludes municipalities from requiring residential fire protection sprinkler systems in any residential structure as a condition of plat or building permit approval. And so because that was listed as a condition of plat approval, staff and legal counsel believed it best, out of an abundance of caution, to advise the Planning Commission of the issue and to seek repeal of that condition of plat approval. And so having conditions of plat approval is something that is allowed by the subdivision regulations and state statute. It's done routinely, but in this particular case, it conflicted with state law. And so this was brought back to the Planning Commission. And to summarize our legal counsel's description of the issue, the action brought to the Planning Commission at their April 18th meeting was in the nature of a technicality. This should be a simple process. Condition number 10 was offered by the developers to alleviate concern about the secondary access road, because having sprinklers in the home is an express exception to the need for a secondary access road. At the March 21st meeting, the fire marshal stated that the development already having 2 access points satisfied the fire code and the granting of the modification on remoteness. The developer's position has not changed and it will require sprinklers in the homes. However, listing the developer's offer as an express requirement of plat approval appears to conflict with state law. The developer's requirement is proposed to be enforced by a restrictive covenant, and this action is really about ensuring compliance with state law. So the Planning Commission met on April 18th, and they voted 7-0 to repeal condition number 10, imposing a sprinkler requirement and making a finding that the developer has voluntarily offered to record a restrictive covenant requiring residential fire sprinkler systems in all new dwellings in Overlook Estates. So it was recognized that the sprinkler system was an effort by the developers to go and provide an extra level of fire safety and protection by providing the sprinkler system. There would be no fiscal impact on the city as a result of this action, and except for ongoing maintenance of public streets, water, and sewer lines following their acceptance. So in terms of commission action today, I would just note that under the State Planning, Zoning, Enabling Act, planning commissions are charged with the approval or disapproval of subdivision plats, and city commissions are authorized to accept or not accept dedications of right-of-way and easements. So if you concur with the proposed dedication of land for public purposes proposed on this plat, and with the Planning Commission finding that it conforms with the provisions of the subdivision regulations with the 2 noted variations and the 1 noted modification of the fire code, a motion should be made to accept the offered street right-of-way easements, restricted access dedications, and authorize the mayor to sign the plat on behalf of the city commission as follows. And there is on page 19 of your report a draft motion to be considered. In the alternative, the city commission could choose to decline acceptance of any 1 or more of the offered dedications. A motion should then be made to decline acceptance of the specified street right-of-way easements and return this plat to the Planning Commission, stating its reasons for not wishing to accept the dedications. And there is a draft motion for that also on page 19. There's a lot of moving parts. There's restrictive covenants. There's agreements as the use of common area. There's other things. One thing that was carried over and has identified as an item that needs addressing that staff is actively working on is that on June 24th, 2003, the Elks Club and Mr. Veneer entered into a signed notarized agreement for that agreement authorized an emergency access across the Elks property, but that was supposed to be memorialized, that agreement, into a recorded easement instrument, and that has not occurred. So city staff has been working with Mr. Pestinger, the owner of Great Life Golf and Fitness, to get that 2003 agreement converted into something that is recordable and can run with the land and be a record. And staff has met with Mr. Pestinger, and he is agreeable to executing a recordable easement, but we are still working with him on the details of the description and exhibit for that. There's a current access easement across the Great Life property, provides access to a cell tower site, and Mr. Pestinger would like the emergency access easement to correspond with the description of that access easement, and so we're actively working on that. The other thing I would point out is I received an email from Sid Ritz, who's been representing the River Run property owners on issues relating to the interaction between the 2 subdivisions, and he indicated to me that he felt that the River Run issues had been addressed to his satisfaction, and he didn't have any further comments or concerns. So that is what I can report on those 2 items this afternoon. I'd be open to any questions. We got a whole bunch of attachments that were provided to you. We tried to be as clear and transparent as we could in providing all that information to you. I know it's almost overwhelming, but we have people there in the room, Ms. Butler, city manager, Ms. Driscoll. There are others who can answer questions directly. I'll do the best I can.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Andrew. And before we move to questions, I didn't know if staff or Ms. Butler had any comments they wanted to make before we.
I'll certainly give her, Ms. Butler, the opportunity. I know she's well-versed. She's been through this quite a bit, and if you didn't have the benefit of the Planning Commission, viewing the Planning Commission meeting, she provided a pretty concise synopsis of where her opinion lies.
Sure. I don't really have any preliminary statement, but I'm ready to address any questions that you may have.
Okay, I will start to my right with Commissioner Linkwitz.
I guess the main question I have is just looking at it in very simple terms. It's something that was approved roughly 20 years ago. We have a smaller number of lots versus the original Phase 2. Why is this just not grandfathered in?
So the reason that it's not grandfathered in is because it's the plat for this area was never recorded. So it's an unplatted area. And so vesting of development rights, they vest upon the recording of a plat. And so everything that was previously platted has vested development rights under state law, but this particular area does not.
Thank you.
So to follow up on that, the Phase 1, even though it has over 30 homes to be built, is fine because of the vested rights of the 2003 plat being recorded.
That's my opinion, yeah. I think it would be difficult for this body to retroactively apply a code that was not in place at the time.
Okay, I just wanted to say that. Thank you. Commissioner Longman?
I want to thank city staff for all the effort and work they put into this. This is a lot, and I think the developer has listened to the needs or request of the River Run residents. And my original opposition to this was the cost of the water line, and do we have assurance that that is going to be fact, that residents will not be assessed for the cost of that water line?
I don't know if Dean wants to speak to that, but that'll be addressed through the formatting of the special assessment district. Go ahead, Dean.
Yeah, I have lots of exhibits in there, and it's towards the back, but there is a map of the proposed benefit district. It says proposed benefit area map, and it's towards the rear of your packet, but it's a colored map. And on that colored map, the proposed benefit area is in red. And so the way that that is proposed is that you would have the properties currently in the county at the northwest corner of Markley Road and Magnolia. That would be the primary benefit area, and then potentially a portion of Great Life Golf and Fitness, and then the Overlook Estates Addition. But in that proposed benefit area, that does not include any of the original River Run addition. So no residents in River Run would be subject to a benefit district assessment for the offsite water line connection.
And I would add that was prepared in consultation with City Bond Council, and creation of the special assessment district will be an action item that comes back before you as the governing body.
So there could be future development that would be assessed for this, in this benefit district.
Yes, in fact, there's a couple different mechanisms, whether it's inside the city limits or outside the city limits, but there's a way to defer those special assessments for unplatted agricultural ground until such time as they do benefit from the improvement.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Davis?
Okay, I guess my question would, for Attorney Butler, would be to, if you can, let me know if we're where I think I want to be. What I'm trying to do is to make sure that, as a city commission, we are protecting future residents with their with access to police, fire, EMS in a timely fashion. Should that once in a 1,000-year event occur, I wouldn't want faulty decision-making on our part, the planning committee, on just the government process, to look like we had built in something that was going to eventually fail. One problem I have is with the request for a variance to the maximum length of the dead-end cul-de-sac. I mean, we've established that through whatever process, and it exists for certain reasons. And does any of what is proposed in these 10 conditions or 9 conditions, or any of those unable to move forward if the variance to the cul-de-sac is not granted?
So the variance was granted by the Planning Commission as part of its review. It was found that that was an appropriate variance to be granted. So this body under state law is charged with reviewing only the acceptance of the street and utility dedications to the public. So it's a bifurcated process, if you will, where the Planning Commission is charged with making that finding, and this body is charged merely with reviewing the acceptance of the dedication. So to that end, based on, because I was at the Planning Commission meeting, I can tell you that the Planning Commission did have before it, as part of its record, the testimony of the fire marshal at the time talking about his comfort with the variance requested and the ability of the fire department to operate with that reduced length of the cul-de-sac.
And if I may, Dean, I think in your staff report, you commented on the 2003 deliberations where the design of the cul-de-sacs was modified to be easier for the fire apparatus to navigate so that they could turn around rather than have to back down the length of a cul-de-sac.
Yeah, there were several things incorporated in at the time. The fire department had just purchased its first quint, and there was concern, and so the design engineer was charged with going through and looking at all the cul-de-sacs on the individual streets, but the primary feature to help reduce concern about the total length of cul-de-sac was the turnaround that was constructed 540 feet east of Marymount Road, so that there's multiple places within the subdivision to turn around. So it would be a very, very rare occasion where any type of fire apparatus would have to travel the entire length of Overlook Drive in order to turn around, because there are intermediate spots within the subdivision to turn around and get back out. So the only place where the length of the cul-de-sac comes into play would be to responses to calls on that section. The other thing I would note is that this layout reduces the total length of Overlook Drive from what was proposed in 2003 by about 1,000 feet. So the street is 1,000 feet shorter than what was reviewed in 2003 by the Planning Commission.
Okay, thank you. And this is probably not the venue to discuss this, but I guess my years up here, I've seen us spend more time trying to circumvent the secondary access. I mean, the time and money we've spent trying to circumvent it, we probably could have built 10 of these roads. And, if we have rules, they're rules for a reason. If you have a school zone, the light's flashing, it's 20 miles an hour. It doesn't matter if you're FedEx and you're late for your delivery, you don't get a special variance to go 50 during that school zone. If our rules are inappropriate, then maybe we need to look at them. But Just want to make sure that public safety is being served. And one other question, in the event that delivery of public safety services is delayed because of access, what's the city's liability?
Well, I hate to give the typical lawyer answer of it depends, but it does depend, right? There are a lot of variables that go into risk assessment and liability, and there are a lot of defenses and immunities available to a government in terms of review and whether or not, they followed the code provisions, whether it's a discretionary call, those types of considerations. So I would be reluctant in open session, especially to, give kind of a statement to that effect. Certainly if it's something that you'd like to discuss more in executive session, where I could provide some additional legal advice, I would do that. But I really do think it would be hard to, say definitively, because there are a number of variables that go into everything in any type of liability assessment.
I'd say that's pretty good off the top of your head. Thank you. I'm done. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Ryan, did we lose him?
Oh, no.
He just fell off. Okay. Hopefully he'll be back. So I'll ask a couple questions on the emergency. Okay, first of all, the fact that we are the 11 lots that are under the Overlook Estates Addition, the fact that they are being sprinkled does away with even the need for the second entrance. Is that correct?
Yes. So under your 2012 International Fire Code, it's Appendix D, and it says that, a secondary access road is required, except if all of the homes are sprinkled. And the developer has voluntarily offered to sprinkle those and to memorialize that requirement in a restrictive covenant that it will be reviewed as part of its architectural committee, I believe. I know Mr. Cochran's in the room and can probably speak more specifically about that. But I'd seen a prior draft of that restrictive covenant, and they're retaining the ability to enforce that by judicial action. So yes, I think that after initial questions about whether or not the secondary access road, required by your code, if those conditions were met, the developer came forward and said, we're excited about this development and we'd really like to move. So let's impose this voluntary requirement, because then it alleviates the need for that secondary access road at all. And so that is the offer. However, I would be remiss in not mentioning that the Planning Commission heard from the fire official that, in the opinion of the fire official, that the access points, that there were in fact two, and that those two were compliant with the fire code. And in researching that, because of some of the concerns that were raised at the Planning Commission meetings, I discovered that when the 2012 fire code was adopted back in 2016, there was the ordinance adopting that delegates the authority for interpretation to that fire code official to make that determination in interpreting the code. And even appeals of those decisions are delegated to a different body and not this body itself. So that was delegated by ordinance. And so the Planning Commission did hear from the official vested with that authority that, in his opinion, in interpreting the code, it was compliant without the requirement of the sprinkling, but that with that being offered, it really, I think his phrasing was extra meat on the sandwich. So.
So going back to the emergency exit, because we haven't, we need it for phase one, I take it, or not. Let's put it this way. It's been brought up that, first of all, the emergency exit, there's not a recorded document giving that access. How do we make sure that that agreement is recorded? Do we need to do that prior to the Overlook Estates plat being recorded? And also, I believe Mr. Andrew noted that that needed to be widened from what it currently is. So how do we make sure that that happens?
So my understanding is that the conditions of the plat approval, as they were approved by the Planning Commission, require the developer to improve that access road as part of the plat process. And as part of that, I believe that's what Mr. Andrew was speaking about, his conversations more recently with the Great Life operator, that confirmed that even though there is a recorded or a notarized signed agreement as to that access road easement, that the recorded document, clarifying or putting of record the easement itself does not appear to be in place, but they're working on that to put it in a recordable form, and it'll be recorded along with the plat.
Okay, good. That would make me feel much better.
Mr. Andrew can correct me if I misspoke about any of that.
Yeah, that would be the plan. As I noted, this is one that is a little more complicated from the standpoint that we have a set of general restrictive covenants. We have a set of architectural design guidelines. We have a agreement between the River Run and Overlook Estates HOA as to the use of the common area. We have a restrictive covenant dealing with the voluntary requirement to have sprinklers. And then we have this emergency access easement that staff is currently working with Mr. Pessinger on to get executed and recorded, pending having an acceptable exhibit that properly describes it. And all of those things would be on our recording punch list to get recorded with the plat, because we don't want to have a situation where there is a plat recorded. You could potentially have lot sales of a lot and not have the covenants in place at the same time. So all of those things have to be recorded concurrently. And it's staff's job to make sure that they are recorded concurrently, and everything that is on that list gets recorded.
Great, thank you. I see we have Commissioner Ryan back. Commissioner Ryan, any questions or comments? Okay, everything's okay? Okay, he said. Okay, one last question I had is, from everything I've heard, obviously there's some variances, but the latitude, we have the latitude for these variances, whether it's through the Planning Commission or what we're doing today, correct?
Well, the Planning Commission approved the variances.
the variances,
They
right.
adopted the findings, and the role of this body is merely to accept
those.
the dedications and easements as proposed.
I did have one other question
Okay.
there. Marymount Road, there at the cul-de-sac, is that a city street on to the Great Life parking lot, or is that private?
That is a private driveway that's owned by Great Life Golf and Fitness. Once you get to the far south side of the turnaround, there's a point there where you're entering Great Life property. So that is an access road, but it's not a public street.
So as it transitions from public street to access road is the easement that will be developed and recorded, correct?
Correct. The easement will extend from the north line where it intersects with Marymount Road across that roadway over to there's an exhibit that depicts it. It's just not in a form that's recordable, and that's what I'm working with Mr. Pessinger on. But it would basically correspond with that road and then across the parking lot over to reach the point where the existing gate is at the boundary between Great Life and Overlook Estates. That would be the area that would be the subject to the access easement.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Just one more comment. Yeah, just looking at the big picture of this, if these are 11, I'm just going to call them $1 million homes going in, from the big picture, that's great for local development, because chances are each one of those homes is associated with a job that's supporting 3 or 4 other jobs. So, from a very big, eye in the sky view, it's a great thing. I just want to make sure that we are not putting ourselves in harm's way from a safety perspective, because we don't interfere with the private business of building and selling homes. If you can build it there, somebody will probably buy it. But when things go wrong, that pile of stuff is usually right up in front of this dais here. And I just like to make sure the floor is as clean as possible before it gets started.
Okay, with that, I don't know if anyone from the development team would like to make any comments before we open it up to the public. Okay, if not, I'll open it up for public comment. Ask that you please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less, and we'll go from there.
Ben Winholt, Salina. There's a lot of cogs to this, and I'm going to just dwell was not the access road for the thing, but I'm going to dwell on the 11 lots. Mr. Andrews said that 2 of the lots are able to be tied to the sanitary sewer. I take it's not a deep sewer, so they would have to have a lift station in the basement if they have down there. But the other 9 lots will have to have their own lift stations for the sewer. What this creates when you have 9 of those is a very high pressure drain, basically a force drain they call it, which will open up the city to liability if that 8-inch main plugs up farther down the road. Sewer backups into homes that are tied onto that sewer because there's force behind it with 9 other pumps basically doing that. So there could be a liability issue, not just for the safety, but just for the fact of backup of sewer. On top of that, on the water side, if these homes are going to be sprinkled, they will have to have an RPZ, a reduced pressure zone backflow preventer, which has to be tested every year. Basically for the sprinkler system alone itself. If you've ever watched a movie where a sprinkler head goes off in an office or something, that is not clean water that comes out by any means. So it is black and it is nasty. Hence, that's why the backflow prevention's in place to protect the city main from getting any of that back into their main. $1 million home, as Mr. Commissioner Davis called it, I don't think I'd want to invest in $1 million home if I know I have to have a lift station for all of my sewage and have an RPZ and have the whole house sprinkled, something that I'm liable for every year as far as testing. That's just my opinion, but it's kind of odd that you would put a development that's lower than the sewer and try to make it work with 9 lift stations.
The actual ratio is 5 lots served by gravity and 6 lots would have their own ejector pumps.
Still force drain.
Pardon me. I might need this. Good afternoon. John Blanchard, Salina. Commissioner Davis, you mentioned circumventing the code. I just want to read directly from the fire code the definition of a fire apparatus access road. A road that provides fire apparatus access from a fire station to a facility, building, or portion thereof. This is a general term, inclusive of all other terms such as fire lane, public street, private street, parking lot lane, and access roadway. I sent all of you an email, I don't know if you got it or not, but it had that, and it also had a map that showed the primary fire apparatus access road and what Dean Andrew described as a secondary access road that comes through Edgewood Drive. What that map clearly shows is that you do have 2 fire access roads, but they all have to come through the same point at the north end of the turnaround circle at the terminus of Marymount Road. So there is 0 feet of separation for the access roads. The modification was for 1,100 feet. The fire marshal does have the ability to modify that. He does not, however, have the authority to take it from whatever the distance might be to 0, because that completely destroys the purpose and intent of the fire code. Making you aware of this, another of your concerns is liability on the part of the city. You guys can go ahead and pass this, but if you knowingly pass something that is obviously in direct contradiction with the fire code, then I guess you take your chances with that. One of the things that was in the Planning Commission packet that wasn't in this one was the this note from Dean Andrews said, based on the intent of the fire code to reduce the likelihood that both access roads would be compromised or made unusable by a single event, the fact that access can only occur from the north is a factor that could be taken into account analyzing the intent of the fire code. So even the planning director recognizes that you don't have two separate access roads. That was in the planning report. Third thing, very small thing, is that the two roads, the road that goes up and the road that comes out are not 20 feet wide, they're 18 feet wide. Maybe that was a typo in the staff report. The one thing that does bother me, though, is that in the fiscal note, and you asked the question back in this fall, you were told that water line was going to cost $310,000. In the staff report on page 117, that number has changed from $310,000 to $1.5 million for 11 lots. I don't know why that wasn't brought up in the staff report. It should have been. It was also noted that the city won't pay 2/3. There's no 2/3, 1/3. That expired. That doesn't exist anymore. The city's going to pay 91%, and the property owner is going to pay 9.8%. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, anyone else? Yeah, I'll hand it back over there, yeah. Okay, I'll bring it back to the commission. Any other comments or questions?
Just, and it may not be germane to this, but what is the city's cost for the water?
The structure of this would be a special assessment district, so we would finance that, and then it's carried by the city until such time as the properties benefit, and then they're subject to assessment. So initially, the only benefiting portion of the development would be the Overlook Estates development. As development occurs along the rest of that run of water main, then depending on whether they're in the county and subject to 12(6)(a)(19), or whether they're in the city and subject to ag deferral, at the point that they benefit, they either have to make a catch-up payment and make annual payments for the remainder of the term, or they start year one of the term. The statute varies depending on whether they're in the city limits or not. So we would be financing the project to be repaid as properties benefit from the improvement.
Now, what we would get repaid would be 9% as reported, or does it approach the 100?
The cost, the portion that would be allocated to Overlook Estates, I think is what he's referring to, is the 9%. The benefit area, the remainder of the benefit area is outside of Overlook Estates, would be special assessment finance to be reimbursed as the other properties benefit and become subject to that assessment. So we would be financing it up front to be paid as property develops and receives benefit from the improvement.
Is this water that we were planning on adding?
Well,
in the absence of Overlook Estates?
Yeah, we made the commitment in 2003 to make the connection. And somewhat related, but Valley View Estates had sewer problems a little bit between here and Markley Road, so there was quite a bit of effort put in by city staff to find a sewer alignment, and so that area in the northwest corner of Magnolia and Markley has been a topic in terms of configuration of infrastructure. Can't speak for the property owners. Some have acreages, some have indicated some interest in developing as infrastructure becomes available to them. But I think as part of our future land use planning, it is a growth area. It's an area that calls for infrastructure. We'd be putting it in and then waiting for it to develop to be reimbursed.
Okay.
Okay, any other comments? And I admit this is not perfect by any means. We're working within the confines of the river and all that other that we've talked about, but there's been significant input and stuff by the fire department, legal counsel, and staff to get us to this point, and I thank all them for that. So I'll see if there's a motion someone that a commissioner would like to make.
And I'd refer you to page 19 of your report that outlines 2 possible motions you could make for today's meeting. And so on page 19, the first motion would be to authorize the mayor to sign a plat on behalf of the commission. And there's a motion there to that effect. The second one would be the commission could choose to decline the acceptance of the offered dedications, and a motion should be made to decline that acceptance and return this plat to the planning commission, stating its reasons for not wishing to accept the dedications. And there's a draft motion for that as well on page 19.
Do we have a... It looks like we lost Commissioner Ryan again.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, I move that upon review of the plat as found in the reasonable discretion of the Planning Commission to conform to the provisions of the subdivision regulations with the 2 noted variations to the subdivision regulations, the 1 noted modification from the fire code, and the conditions of the final plat approval, the City Commission accepts the offered street right-of-way easements and restricted areas or restricted access dedications as shown on the plat and authorizes the mayor to sign the plat on the behalf of the City Commission.
Second.
Okay, I'm going to read the whole thing again. We have...
I'm sorry, Mayor.
Yes. Go ahead.
Strictly a procedural matter, but I do think it would be prudent to be sure that Commissioner Ryan's connection was reinstated so that he could hear the motion and participate in the vote.
Or alternatively, he could be viewed as abstaining from the vote.
Ultimately, my concern was if he was deemed to be
voting
present, that we would want to be sure that he heard the motion and could participate. If we have lost him such that he is no longer participating, I think you're correct.
That's kind of my assumption, that he's not participating at the moment, so I'd deem him as an abstention if the city attorney agrees.
I think that I would defer to Mr. Bankston on that point, but if...
Is your microphone on? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I would defer to Mr. Bankston on that point as to the city's procedures in that regard on the voting, but if he's not on at the moment, if he comes up before the vote, then we may need to reread the motion.
Okay.
Yeah, my concern is that the abstention presumes participation.
Oh.
And
okay.
He's either absent or participating.
I see.
Could you try calling him?
In addition to being here for the motion, he's been off and on as part of the deliberation. So I think probably the cleaner way is just to consider him absent for this vote, would be my suggestion.
Or take a 3-minute recess. 1 minute recess.
I'll look to council if we get him back on. If I read and make that we have a first and a second, does that satisfy our? Okay, I wanted to make sure. Okay, I want to make sure. Commissioner Ryan, can you hear us? Thumbs up. Yep. Okay, we have. Okay, thank you, Mr.
I'm sorry. Question. Is Commissioner Ryan able to audibly participate? Or is he just,
Commissioner,
as a convenience, using...
Commissioner Ryan, can you unmute?
I'm able to hear you, dude. It's fine.
Okay, we're going to...
background noise, so I'm remaining on the mute generally.
Okay, we're going to reread the motion, and if you stay where we can hear your voice, I think that's what legal counsel prefers. Thank you. We have a motion and a second on the floor. It reads, I move that upon review of the plat as found in the reasonable discretion of the Planning Commission to conform to the provisions of the subdivision regulations with the 2 noted variations to the subdivision regulations, the 1 noted modification from the fire code, and the conditions of the final plat approval, the City Commission accepts the offered street right-of-way, easements, and restricted access dedications as shown on the plat, and authorize the mayor to sign the plat on behalf of the City Commission. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, that passes 5-0. Thank you. Okay, that will lead us to item 7.3.
Item 7.3, approve ordinance number 22-11134 on second reading, changing the zoning district classification from A1 to PDDR, and approval of an amended preliminary development plan for an 11-lot residential subdivision on a 52.9-acre tract of land located south of River Run Addition and west of Great Life Golf and Fitness.
Okay, ordinance number 22-11134 was passed on first reading on September 26, 2022, with second reading held in abeyance until the property was final platting. Since that time, a portion of Lot 1, Block 1, was converted to common area to be owned and managed by Overlook Estates HOA, and the Planning Commission approved a final plat for the Overlook Estates Addition on March 21st, 2023. Are there any questions or comments from the commission? Okay. Are there any questions or comments from the public? Okay, with that, I will bring it back to the commission.
I move we approve ordinance number 22-11134 on second reading.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 22-11134 on second reading. May we have a roll call?
We did just lose Commissioner Ryan again.
Okay. Still amazes me we can talk to people on the moon and we can't get cell service everywhere. I don't get it, so. We'll wait a few minutes here to see if we can get Commissioner Ryan back on. Nuts. Okay.
I think you've maintained your quorum and you don't have a requirement for a supermajority or any type of increased vote. It would be appropriate for you to consider him absent during this vote if you would like to proceed.
Okay. We will consider Commissioner Ryan absent at this time. And we have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 22-11134 on second reading. We will have roll call.
Commissioner Davis?
Aye.
Commissioner Lenkowitz?
Aye.
Commissioner Longbine?
Aye.
Mayor Hoppick?
Aye. That passes 4-0 at that point. Okay. Okay, that will lead us to other business. Is there any business that a commissioner would like to bring before the group?
I don't know how well it's been publicized, but homelessness has been a huge topic and a group is having a forum similar to what we did in December, Wednesday evening at 6 p.m. down here at Salina Grace on 7th Street.
And that's dealing with homeless. You didn't, yeah, dealing with the homeless.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well, variety of issues.
issues, but that, okay.
It all revolves back to homelessness.
Last Friday, I had the pleasure of attending the Fair Housing Seminar at TPAC, and it was held by the Salina Community Relations Department. It was very well organized, had a very informative speakers, and I learned quite a bit, despite my experience in the field.
Good. Commissioner Davis, anything?
Nothing. I'm just paying attention to the Genesis Health Club. Is there, and I know it's not, has not been officially, unless something happened in the last 2 hours, is it known what impact that would have on Salina, Saline County? Have we just, anybody been?
As an organization, I'm
As
sorry,
far
let me make
as-
sure, you're talking about
well,
the Blue Cross Blue Shield?
No, the
Oh.
Genesis Health Club's
Oh,
company. Yeah.
yes. No, there certainly be some interpretive issues in terms of what qualifies for an exemption. My understanding is there was a time frame that was added to the bill from its original draft, and it really would be, my understanding, kind of a case-by-case assertion on the part of the property owners that they qualify for an exemption. So we'd have to take it up as those come in. And when I say we would have to take it up, it's the Board of Tax Appeals. It's not for the city or necessarily even the county to determine. So for those that may not understand what we're talking about, there was legislation passed that had certain categories of activities, health clubs, daycares, restaurants, I may be forgetting one, that if municipalities or government entities enter into those, I believe, for 180 days in a year, and the time that they were established relative to a private sector business in the same activity, the private sector business could qualify for a property tax exemption. So it's very case specific in terms of the government activity and how it corresponds to the private business that's seeking an exemption.
So does and we'll just use Genesis since that name was brought up, do they have to prove their case before the Board of Tax Appeals? Is that how that works?
The statute creates some parameters, so I think if they can demonstrate that the parameters are met, the presumption is that they then qualify for the property tax exemption. And I don't think it's inappropriate to use Genesis. They very actively have lobbied for this for multiple years on the basis that they're a private health club competing with YMCA's in particular is the example that they give of a tax-exempt competitor.
So it's not just government involvement in those activities, it's any other already established tax-exempt organization?
Yeah, the focus of Genesis anyway was not-for-profits, and so, again, it would have to look at the specifics of that legislation and how it applies.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, before we go to Citizens Forum, I forgot to thank Ms. Butler for being here. We appreciate your time and your expertise in walking us through this Overlook Ventures or Overlook Estates Addition. So thank you very much. So, okay, that will bring us to Citizens Forum. Again, we open the floor up for anyone that'd like to make comments on a subject, and you have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon again, John Blanchard, Salina. First of all, I'd like to congratulate and wish you guys good luck on Overlook Estates. I know it's been a long process for you guys. This was never, my objection to the fire apparatus road was never about them or the veneers or their project. It was about, we have codes and laws and we have a planning department that too often lets problems fall through the cracks. You had DRT meetings. This particular developer should have been made aware of a lot of these things in those DRT meetings. I hope and I put it in the email that I sent to you guys, I hope with the over 1,000 units we're trying to build over the next few years, that we really need to lock some of this stuff down. So I hope that, if nothing else, that this helps to serve as a learning opportunity for all of this. Now, last week when I came in, I asked a couple of questions about the fire department accreditation, and since that time, I wasn't expecting to hear that we didn't meet all the requirements to be reaccredited. But I went back and looked at the history of our accreditation, and it started with Larry Mulliken. Are we able to get a copy of the report from CFAI or the Center for Public, because they issue a public report that lists sort of what the deficiencies, et cetera, might be.
I know they verbally reported out. I don't know if we've received a written one, but at the point that we do,
if I could give you a call and maybe figure out if I need to make a request for open records, I can kind of get the language for that. But would appreciate kind of knowing what that is, and then also just in a general inquiry. And just one last thing is, rather than spend the time on the access road and so on, I might, staff kind of, I don't know how much they looked into the vested rights of what the state allows for vested rights, but I've worked in other states, and other states' vested rights would have actually concluded that Mr. Veneer had vested rights by virtue of his participation in the benefit district on the first round of special assessments. So I don't know how much research you did going into that, but I think that there were other avenues that you could have taken this and didn't. So, but just the inquiry, any update you can give us on how the housing negotiations are going. And thank you guys, as I said in the email, thanks for your service.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else?
Norman Mantle, Salina. I went to Kenwood Park Saturday to attend a horse show. I also went around the tennis courts. All the gates are locked. I called the phone number. Nobody would answer the phone. So where are we of getting this resolved so people can go to the tennis court? Second, we've got contamination issues with the PVC pipe. It's been announced that this is contamination, so all this plastic pipe that we're using for our water and house system, it's got contamination. I know of a person, a national figure, she will not drink out of a plastic cup. So you've got problems coming down the road. As for this communication, why don't we make a solid copper wire from the commission room to each one of you commissioners' house? If you wanted to go remote, it won't be intercepted.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? Okay, we have an executive session. Could we take a, 5-minute? Let's make it a 7-minute break. How's that? So, could I have Commissioner Linkowitz?
Yeah, how much time do you need for the meeting?
25 minutes, that should be sufficient.
All right. I move the City Commission recess into executive session for 25 minutes to discuss the subject of legal considerations relating to the pending case
Just a sec. Hey, could we, please, could we, till we get recess? Thank you. Haven't used that in 2 years, so go ahead.
Would it be better if I just did a recess, or we did a motion for a recess?
Yeah, plus this, and just add 7 minutes to it.
Okay.
So,
Tack it on the front or the back?
the front.
Okay.
So,
So I'll rephrase then.
Okay.
I move that we go into a 5-minute recess and re-adjourn at, let's do 6:10.
Right.
Will that work?
6:10 into executive session. That'll work.
And then recess into executive session for 25 minutes to discuss the subject of legal considerations relating to the pending case of Tim LePage versus City of Salina and Larry Mulliken with legal counsel Terrell Mock of the law firm of Fisher, Patterson, Saylor, and Smith, based upon the need for consultation with an attorney for public body, which would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship pursuant to KSA 75-4319, Section B, subsection 2. The open meeting will resume in this room at
6:35.
Yep, 6:35.
Second. forget
Did you want to?
the second.
I wanted to apologize, first of all, for causing a ruckus. I thought
I think it's who you were talking to, if I had to point a finger.
I thought we were recessed.
Okay.
I apologize.
Okay.
And just, I'm sure it was just a slip of the words, but Commissioner Linkowitz referred to re-adjourning, and anytime we hear adjourning, that term, I wanted to be sure the minutes reflected that we would be reconvening. I assume that was your intent.
Oh, yeah, it was. My mistake.
Well,
Wrong
no,
nomenclature.
small point, but it's important for the minutes. So.
Absolutely.
Okay, we have a motion, a second to, following a 5-minute break, recess into executive session at 6:10, returning to this room at 6:35. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We'll be back in here at 6:35, and I do not believe there's any action to be taken.
Correct. In addition to Ms. Mock, the city manager, deputy city manager, assistant city manager, and city legal counsel will be attending as well.
Thank you. Okay, we are back in session. We have no action to be taken. With that, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We will see everyone next week. Thank you.